The roll will now be called, and those responding to their names will indicate by surname the nominee of their choosing. The reading clerk will now call the roll.
Adams. Jeffries. Adderholt. Jordan. Babin. Jordan. Bacon. McCarthy. Baird.
There it is.
Jordan.
That was Congressman Don Bacon, Republican of
Balderson.
Nebraska, as anticipated, not voting present,
Jordan.
voting for Kevin McCarthy. That is
Ballant.
not what Jim Jordan and the
Jeffries.
Jordan forces wanted him to do. They wanted him to
Banks.
vote present, but instead he voted
Jordan.
for McCarthy. So that is essentially a no
Barr.
vote on Jordan. The next one we're listing
Jeffries.
for is Congresswoman Chavez DeRemer
Caston.
from Oregon. She represents a
Jeffries.
district that President Biden won by
Castor
9
of
points.
Florida.
Let's listen in.
Jeffries. Castro of Texas. Jeffries. Chavez DeRemer. McCarthy.
Congresswoman Chavez DeRemer of Oregon, representing a
Shearfillis McCormick.
district that President Biden won
Jeffries.
by 9 points, voted for McCarthy. That is basically
Chu.
2 votes against Jordan. He can only afford to lose
Jeffries.
1 more.
D'Esposito. Zelton. Diaz-Balart. Scalise.
So, with that vote for Steve Scalise from Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida, and the unusual vote from
Single.
Congressman Anthony D'Esposito
Jeffries.
from New York for
Doggett.
former Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York, who
Jeffries.
ran and lost a race for
Downs.
governor. That is 4 House Republican
Jordan.
votes against Jim Jordan, which means Jim
Jordan.
Jordan will not win the
Jordan.
speakership on this vote. Now, whether that means,
Duncan.
unless they change their votes,
Jordan.
which will mean, again, unless they
of
change
Florida.
their votes, that he will not win the speakership. Now, whether he
Jordan.
wins in a
Edwards.
subsequent vote could happen. That's what
Jordan.
happened with McCarthy. It also could
Elsie.
happen, as what happened with Steve Scalise behind closed doors, that he could
Garcia.
find his votes eroding.
Jimenez. McCarthy.
Okay, John King, I'm sorry, but that's 7 House Republicans.
And so
Golden of
if you
Maine.
have to get that number to 2,
Jeffries.
if everybody keeps voting, and Jim Jordan has to get the number, not
Goldman
voting
of
for him
New
to
York.
2, can he negotiate? Does he have the leverage to negotiate? How many times is he willing to take the hit? Kevin McCarthy, frankly, forgive me, humiliated himself by staying out there and out there and out there, and finally wore them down by cutting deals. The fact that we're having this vote today
Gonzalez.
is because he cut those deals. He gave so much leverage to the rank and file that he was not an effective leader. So can Jim Jordan get himself in the McCarthy box and negotiate his way to that gavel? Now it's up to 8. If the answer is yes, and that's a big if, capital I, capital F, bold-faced it, and
Virginia.
underline it. If, what does he have to give up to get there, and how much power,
of
authority
Texas.
does he have? But
Jordan.
he called for this vote. This was his idea. This was his play, under the idea that I'm going to lose the first one, and then I'm going to win them over.
Gut it out.
I'm going to wear them down. So
Granger.
we will. A speaker has to run the House. A speaker has to be a legislative tactician. This is Jim
Granger.
Jordan's strategy and tactic. We'll see if he's any good at it.
Who was the 8th?
Scalise.
Who was
Tony
the
Gonzalez.
Tony Gonzalez
He
from
voted
Texas.
For Scalise.
He voted for Scalise, so that was one that what we weren't even looking for.
Jeffries. Jeffries. Jordan. Jordan. LaTurner. Jordan. Lawler.
Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
McCarthy. Scalise.
Jim Jordan.
Jordan.
watch the House floor and as we watch
Scanlon.
these not Jordan
Jeffries.
votes numbers
Schakowsky.
climb to 14
Jeffries.
now. I'm getting some
Schiff.
texts, and I don't know what you all are hearing. I got a
Jeffries.
text from a former
Schneider.
Republican who said, a former House
Jeffries.
Republican who has
Skolten.
been in situations like this, who said, you
Jeffries.
know, if it was just a
Schreier.
handful, maybe Jordan can do it,
Jeffries.
but it looks so much harder
Schweikert.
now as the numbers go up.
Jordan.
Actually, I know that
Austin
could be the
Scott.
case, but again,
Jordan.
people could be looking at this and saying, I'm just going to vote the way I want to right now. But a lot of these members that we're talking about are
David
Republicans who people in your party, in the Democratic
Jeffries.
Party, think that they can beat and take the majority back in 2024.
Jeffries.
Yeah, I mean, if this number was a handful, I would feel better probably as Jim Jordan, but this
Jordan.
is much larger than I think anyone has
Sessions.
expected. And it is a
Jordan.
presidential year, and we were talking earlier
Sewell.
about in midterms, a vote like this, some
Jeffries.
folks in their campaign could think it would
Sherman.
really matter. But here's the one thing, in those 18
Jeffries.
districts that Biden won
Shell.
but are held by Republican
Jeffries.
congresspeople, some of those are in
Simpson.
states where you don't run very large presidential campaigns, like a New York, like a California.
Nebraska.
Or Nebraska.
Yeah.
And so when you are thinking, my
Slatkin.
constituents aren't going to be focusing so much on the
Jeffries.
presidential because my state is a really
Smith
red
of
state,
Missouri.
but my district is
Jordan.
purple, and I need to make sure that I don't get a campaign
Smith of
ad
Nebraska.
run against me in a moderate
Jordan.
district where I voted for someone like
Smith
Jim
of New
Jordan, who
Jersey.
is the founder of the Freedom
Jordan.
Caucus, is an election denier, and
Smith
is
of
always on Fox
Washington.
News pushing MAGA talking
Jeffries.
points.
And I just want to
Smoker.
add that Mike Simpson
Jordan.
just voted for Scalise,
Sorensen.
which is a bit of a surprise,
Jeffries.
Scott.
Yeah, the number
Soto.
keeps climbing, and so I think, interestingly, by the way, when we did this with McCarthy, they had to
Spanberger.
go on at noon, and they had to keep doing it because the Constitution
Jeffries.
requires it. In this case,
Sparks.
there is no requirement they stay here and do this over and over and over again. So I'm actually really
Sparks.
sort of fascinated now. If you're Jordan, is the strategic move for you here to go for another one
Stansbury.
and see if anybody peels off, or is it to go
Jeffries.
to a meeting?
Okay, so the opposition to Jim Jordan picked up 4 votes there. He had 16 originally, and then in the absent votes, Congressman Ken Buck voted for Tom Emmer. Congressman John James of Michigan voted for Tom Cole. And Victoria Spartz and Congressman LaMalfa all voted for candidates other than Jim Jordan. That's 20 no votes on Jordan. Adam Kinzinger, David Chalian was making this observation earlier, which is what we seem to be hearing very much in a loud voice is from these 20 congressmen is, please do not make Jim Jordan the symbol of the House Republicans.
Yeah, that's correct. Look, I'm impressed that there's 20. I was worried this morning because a lot of the hard opposition to Jordan had been capitulating in the last 24 hours. I think of like Mike Rogers from Alabama, Ann Wagner from Missouri. They were hell no's until they were all in. This is embarrassing for Jim Jordan. And I think this is going to be hard for him to fix. I mean, the only thing I can imagine is if he starts cutting deals, and those deals include things that he's never supported in the past. For instance, if he says, I'm committed to bringing Ukraine funding on the floor, he may be able to peel off 1 or 2 of those. If he says, I'm committed to whatever it is, I don't know. Maybe he can get to his number, but I think this is hard. I think the free vote here, I mean, the easiest thing to do if you're a Republican is to vote for Jim Jordan the first time and then go away the second time. So I think you could see even more peel away on the second round, or he consolidates. Who really knows? But I think it's going to be very hard for him to become speaker now. But that doesn't mean they are not going to use blistering pressure on Fox News, Newsmax, all those OAN to activate the base to scare the crap out of these people. But there are a lot of brave people in those 20 that I'm very proud of today.
The tellers agree in their tallies that the total number of votes cast is 432, of which the Honorable Jim Jordan of the state of Ohio has received 200 votes. The Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 212 votes. The Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California has received 6 votes. Lee Zeldin of the state of New York has received 3. The Honorable Steve Scalise of the state of Louisiana has received 7. The Honorable Mike Garcia of the state of California has received 1. The Honorable Tom Emmer of the state of Minnesota has received 1. The Honorable Tom Cole of the state of Oklahoma has received 1. The Honorable Thomas Massey of the state of Kentucky has received 1. No person having received a majority of the whole number of votes cast by surname, a speaker has not been elected.